Dark times at Liverpool Football Club on the pitch at the moment. On this week's debate show, we had a good old chat around what is going on with Liverpool's midfield. The full show is on redmenplus.com, where we also discuss Mo Salah's positioning and, in a more light-hearted tone, where Nike rank in terms of Liverpool's kit manufacturers, which feels a little bit out of odds with us at the moment. But yeah, anyway, let's get on to the midfield chat.
Every week, and this has been probably the same for before the season, it feels to me like because Liverpool don't have, we have Thiago Alcantara, but because we don't have, and I think it's by design, the sort of superstar midfield of our rivals, which is Manchester City, and we don't really look around. We look at Real Madrid and we see Modric and Kroos and these great names. So what happens is whenever Liverpool don't win a game of football or draw, don't win a game of football, it's like midfield were crap. We could play away at a team and have 85% possession. They boot one ball over the top and go and score, but it's the midfield's fault. And that's quite general, but this season it's happened a lot. The Fulham game, we drew 2-2. The midfield was poor. Okay. With Palace, we got countered. Guy gets sent off. We draw 1-1. The midfield win up to it again. Bournemouth just gets forgotten about because we won. As I say, there's no analysis thrown in there because we won. So we don't talk about that, which kind of backs me point up to an extent. Then Newcastle, a tough game. We win last second, but everyone knows we can do better at the performance. What happens? Midfield were poor again. Against Everton, the midfield were poor. And I just sort of start to think, is our midfield poor? Do our fans understand what the function of our midfield actually is? Steve Mean had a really good discussion about this recently. Or is it just the sort of fanatical myth where we need to pin the blame somewhere? We have to pick a department. Verge makes a mistake, but it's Verge, so he gets away with that. So are we as a fan base pinning it on the midfield just blindly, or actually is it that bad?
That's a great question. I honestly, because I don't. It's a bit basic, this, but we bought the best goalie in the world, and we bought obviously bought and made the best goalie in the world, and centre half. Right back, left back. You could argue DM, I think, with Fabinho when he's in form.
He's there, yeah.
Right wing, certainly. When we had Mane, left wing, certainly. And then false nine, and Bobby was always that. He was the best false nine in the business. But beyond that, you could say, well, is Jordan Henderson better than ... Because of this dream team mentality, if you do combined 11s, Kev De Bruyne walks in that combined 11 every day because he's the best in the league in his position. And then you look alongside, what's the other side for City? They were playing Bernardo Silva in that when we played them at the Etihad last season. Well, you're going to pick Bernardo Silva over, this doesn't line up in terms of timeline, but like a Gini Wijnaldum as an example, or a James Milner. Like, well, of course you are, because they're the big name stars, the big name players. And you're right. I think it's a bit of like, sometimes we do underestimate what is required. So everyone says get a creative midfielder, but when you get a creative midfielder into Liverpool's midfield, you forget that you've got to change your style of play completely
though, yeah,
because you've got to stop for right or wrong. And I would say, I think people know where I fall on it given the success we've had. You've got to be able to defend for your fucking life in Liverpool's midfield, and you've got to be able to press for your life, and you've got to be able to put your body on the line. There aren't many footballers in the game who are so technically gifted in the first instance, but there are a lot who will then do that as well. And they might be able to do it, but do they want to do it for 50 games a season, for 5 years on the bounce? Do they want to be cutting off passing lanes and throwing the bodies in instead of getting all the guts and the glory? Gini Wijnaldum loved playing for Holland because they played him in a 10 and he just got to score goals and have a laugh. In Liverpool, he was tasked with fucking running around, holding the ball up and sticking his arse in and doing all that kind of stuff. That's why Thiago is so magical, because he loves the dirty stuff as well. Whereas I don't know that Bruno Fernandes would work in a Liverpool midfield. I don't know that I don't think a Kevin De Bruyne would work in the same way. No,
in the system anyway. Yeah,
he's so good. You'd make exceptions for him. You might accommodate him in a team, but yeah, Harvey Elliott is in Liverpool's team because he's brilliant at football. He's got great touch, he's got great vision, he's got a great eye for goal, but he doesn't share his defensive responsibilities. He'll track back all day long for you, and he understands how to do that. So I think the problem with Liverpool's midfield is ultimately we've got a bunch of injury prone players and we haven't been able to rotate enough. That might be, that's a problem to do with fitness. And
but what I'm kind of coming back to you, put on this is is it the reason what, like, I think they've been getting the blame, and that's what I'm kind of getting. Like, obviously we know the injury prone players and stuff like that's a given, but when we don't win a game of football, it feels like too much emphasis is thrown in the midfield blindly, and I don't know whether like that is the case. So against Everton, or I'll come into after Steve's his input, but all 4 of their golden chances to score have got nothing to do with the midfield. But that is ignored because it's like, yeah, but Carvalho didn't bend one in from 25 yards, so it was our midfield.
There's a lot of football analysis and understanding by osmosis, I think. And what I mean is that the midfield becomes like, people can say Liverpool's midfield, and you don't know specifically what they're saying, but you know that they're probably saying something negative, because that's the main topic of concern around Liverpool, is the quality or the availability or the depth or whatever, and it's variations on that, of course. There's some, pick percentages, however you particularly feel about it. Most people could accept that there's some issue with Liverpool's midfield, one of those, all of those. So when there's a problem, inevitably people just go, well, I'm hearing all this midfield talk. It's probably that, I would guess. Go on, Steve, what do you think?
I think really good points made by both of you there, but I think our midfield's changed. I think with the loss of Gini Wijnaldum, we don't have a left and a right recycler of a ball as such anymore, with a babysitter sitting in a 6, if you like, to cover when they're not at home. So Thiago's great. Thiago's not Wijnaldum. He does something different. Thiago is far better on the ball than Wijnaldum ever would be. It's really interesting. I think we're going through an evolution in our midfield, and certainly next summer, if we buy Jude Bellingham, we're not buying £120 million centre midfielder to turn him into the next Gini Wijnaldum. He will do what he does in our midfield, and we'll have to change our shape. Really interesting that Harvey Elliott will probably still be involved in that midfield, and quite rightly should be. So I'm wondering if that team we put out at the weekend, where we had 1 6 and 2 slightly more advanced, is a prelude to what's coming next in the evolution of the midfield.
That's how City played against us. They were using Bernardo Silva as the deeper of their eights last season against us, and we had Fabinho, Thiago and Henderson, but they've got Rodri, who I think is put a piece of paper between him and Fabinho in terms of quality. Thiago's obviously absolutely brilliant, but Bernardo Silva is a winger. He's a front 3 player who they've moved back. So in terms of his dribbling ability and carrying ability, he's absolutely
he's like Elliot, but 6 years older or something, isn't he? Do you know what I mean?
And then they're playing De Bruyne in Henderson's position, and nominally, but not who's the perfect attacking midfielder at this point. The amount of attacking players they get on the pitch is ridiculous compared to ours. But that's the fine balance. So I don't necessarily agree maybe on the Bellingham point, but what we're trying to do is we're upgrading what we've got. People wrongly look at the attributes that we need, or they focus on what Liverpool are lacking and not the baseline of what you need. So Thiago is an upgrade on Gini Wijnaldum because he can do all the dirty work, but he's more technically gifted. But to find those, so Jude Bellingham will probably come in and he'll do all the stuff that Gini Wijnaldum did, but he's so good at football that he'll also add more on top of that game. What the concern is, and where Liverpool need to be careful with the midfield, and this is what we've got to keep a watch out for, is Alonso to Akolani. Is the thing. And people remember Akolani go, Kroc injured. Forget that. What he was a more attacking version of Xabi Alonso, because our problem, and it was our blower to Glenn Johnson, because we needed to be more attacking, and we got lads who were more attacking, but we lost the defensive stability for adding those players. And Liverpool are trying to add quality to break these teams down more without leaving the back door open. And at the moment we're struggling with that balance. We struggled at the start of last season as well with that, but last season we had players available. This season we're going to Old Trafford with James Milner, Harvey Elliott and Jordan Henderson as a midfield 3, which you can engineer a win with that midfield, but that is not a midfield that you're playing if you want to play your perfect brand of football in a big game.
So is it fair to say, if you look at across the midfield in the last 18 months, Henderson had a horrific injury. It was a really bad one, we know that. He's approaching his 32nd birthday. We've kind of reached in and stole his soul for the work he's given us over the years. Are we lacking a little bit of athleticism? If you get on the wrong side of our midfield, they don't recover, is the way I'm watching football matches at the moment.
The thing is, I don't think teams play against our midfield very often. I think what happens is a lot of times in football is teams go very direct. Goals against us are generally scored after like a 30-40 yard pass. Yeah, well, I mean, even if you look at the one Mitrovic scored at Fulham, it goes through Robbo's side, but it's a long pass is played at some point in the sequence. Palace, long pass. Newcastle was just lucky because Henderson blocked it and then it fell to their lad. Whatever, good finish. But a lot of the goals scored against us are, United, long pass through. We know about the first goal with Virgin, all the memes that have gone on, whatever, but a lot of the goals we concede don't come from mistakes or mishaps in the middle. Henderson was a mistake, but that wasn't about his quality. It was just a mistake. It happens in loads of games of football. Same again, some of our best attacks are from Trent. 30-40 yard balls into Salah, bang, we score. We don't score a lot and concede a lot of goals where our midfield play a huge part. Thiago probably the only one who's different there.
The only thing on that is that the midfield's job is to cut that pass out.
Yeah.
And that's that. So when we don't, it's dead easy. It looks really easy to play through us. It's either second man runs or third man runs or balls over the top. All you've got to do is press that guy and stop him from passing. But when our midfield's knackered, it's hard to do that for 90 minutes. And what is the most rotated position in Liverpool's team over the years? It's midfield. Yeah. We never rotated the front three ever. We never rotated the back four ever. The only change in the back four came because our other centre half was always injured. So you had Matip and Lovren and Gomez constantly tagging out to take over that job. And that's what's happened. But the problem with the midfield right now is everyone's goosed. So Fabinho's played too much football. Yep. Henderson's played too much and is now injured as a result, which means Fabinho's going to have to play more football. Yeah. James Milner shouldn't have played half the minutes he's played this season. No. And he shows you how good our squad is, but also shows you how many injuries we've had. He's a perfectly fine guy to come on and for 15 minutes and shut a game down. Yeah. I've got no problem with him coming on for Trent periodically and seeing games out at right back. I thought he was great against Newcastle when he came down that right hand side. I thought he was really good. But he shouldn't be starting games of football, and he shouldn't be playing more than cameo roles for us, and he shouldn't have to. The idea of Curtis Jones, Thiago, Naby and Jordan Henderson, not counting Oxlade-Chamberlain as well, the odds of all five of those being injured at one time, I don't care how injury prone those people are individually, it is still freakish that they would all be out for a concurrent spell. You might have them where they're just, again, it's the tagging out thing. Lovren, Matip and Gomez, all injury prone. We never had to use our fifth choice centre half at any point when we owned all three, when we had those as our four options. We never.
I remember one game in the World Club Cup. That was it. Henderson. Yeah, that was the only game.
When Van Dijk was sick that day.
And it was the other one. Yeah.
You were 100% correct when you said it's the job to cut out the passes. So I'm not saying this, and I don't agree with this, but the media picked up on it. If you rerun the goals, West Ham, Jared Bowen carries the ball 40 yards through the midfield, slips 4 nails in and he scores. Wasn't cut out by the midfield. Tamari Gray in the derby last year wasn't cut out by the midfield. Marcus Rashford cuts back inside Gomez and plays the ball back to the edge of the box, and there's no DM there to cut out the cross. So that's being like sort of uniquely analytical and looking at goal by goal basis.
But then this year, I would argue most of the goals have probably not come from the midfield.
But 3 years ago, that wouldn't have happened because we'd have been more combative in the centre of the park. And that's what the pundits are picking up on.
And we're chasing our tails, trying to win games of football without the goal scoring lads up top. Everyone's trying to take the game and trying to win it. And in some cases, they've had a bit of a crap game. It's mentioned here. Let me just find the comment here. Someone made the mention about the Fulham game. I'll find it in due course. Oh yeah, sorry. The Titch and Green, in fairness, against Fulham, they were all awful, not just the midfield.
Exactly. The defence were giving the ball away every 2 minutes. Trent's long pass they're playing weren't going anywhere.
Van Dijk,
so for our midfield, it's very difficult when your best players are like Van Dijk's playing crossfield crosses to their centre back, passes to their centre back, and when you're giving the ball away a lot on a high turnover, your midfield are working harder because then they have to get back in position and battle and duel, and it's all sort of relative. I feel I just feel as though against Palace, if we score 1 or 2 of those goals we don't have a discussion about their counter-attack goal because it probably doesn't happen. So I think it's all relative, and I don't think the club will be as worried about this whole Liverpool's midfield's finish. You can just pass through them as our fan base are. That's kind of where I was leading to.
Yeah, that's it. Look, my point on this, and look, there is of course the wider debate around we should have moved Ox on, we should have moved Cater on, and if you've moved both of them on and you've brought in lads even in like their age bracket who are just more available, then it's less of an issue because they're coming in and they're helping the other lads be stronger. That's where we're lacking. Our first 4 or 5 midfielders I think are absolutely fucking brilliant. I don't think there's much, I think that we're fine in terms of quality. People can say what they want about Jordan Henderson, he's been superb for Liverpool, genuinely has, I know and like everyone's allowed, everyone can have dips and have and of course you can reach a point where you can't be brilliant for 50 games a season. That does happen too, but I think that's a slightly different issue. My thing on it is that again, that midfield against Manchester United is not a midfield that's capable of putting 95 points down in the Premier League.
Agree.
But that's not, that midfield isn't meant to be starting games of football for us every week. It's meant to.
But it's where we find ourselves, isn't it?
Exactly, and this is where we were in 2021 as well, where you end up with like lads who are, if they're the 11th player in the team or the 10th and 11th player in the team and you've got otherwise a full strength side, you won't even notice a drop off because they're good enough to be in that team.
Like Simicast, when he comes in, you don't really notice too much.
Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain is this. We win the league in 1920 and he plays the 12th most minutes of any Liverpool player, and he's our 4th top goal scorer that season as well. He was absolutely a perfect squad player. He plays in the front 3 when we play like a 4-2-2-2-2. He's playing right in midfield, he's playing in the midfield 3. He played in the false 9 away in Genk in that game, or started at Anfield in the false 9 in that game. He was a brilliant addition to what we do, but when you put him in a midfield with a Tyler Morton and a James Milner, then that midfield is not of the standard because he's not good enough to win games on his own. He's a squad player, so that's where our squad players are playing too much footy, and as a result, our senior players that are left standing are playing too much footy because there's no squad players then to rotate them out because they're being used elsewhere.
You also get, because our back line has been so good and still is, and our front line is what it is, when we show a weakness, when we have bodies missing, if you're an opposing manager ready to play Liverpool in 3 days time and you know Thiago's not playing, you know Henderson's not playing, that's where you do all your work in the week. Let's get runners into the midfield. Let's overrun their midfield. Then you can be as good as you want defensively. You've got to be dealing with 5 or 6 players running at you, and at some point during the game, something is going to give, and you're going to get a chance.
Yeah, the physicality thing. I was listening to the final word, and Chloe was making a point about Carvalho's size, and she was right to say so. Like, there was nothing wrong with him playing that game, but at the end of the day, when you're up against Iwobi and Onana, who are both big lads, strong lads, experienced players, when the ball's in the air, it doesn't matter how good you are, Bernardo Silva's not going to win those headers. And unfortunately we get a lot of that, don't we?
Yeah, well, you also got a fucking massive dead leg and got took off at half time, you know what I mean? Like, you know, and you know, who knows how he would have got a grip on that game if he'd been allowed to continue. But that's the thing at the moment, because we're not winning games of football, and it probably all boils down to the injuries, and again, a little bit of the recruitment thing without a doubt. You know, if Liverpool managed to convince Tchouaméni to join them in the summer, then I don't know whether it's fair for us to have this debate, but it takes that off the table, certainly. So yeah, look,
we got Arthur now, mate. We're flying.
Well, I'm fascinated to see what he does, what he can bring.
Player.
If he's just a slightly crapper version of Thiago, but he does similar, you know, he plays the role in a similar way, then that's laughing for me, because, you know, between there, I say for me, he's just taken over now. Now, he played quite a lot of footy last season. You know, he played about 1,500 minutes, which is not loads, but that's Thiago understudy minutes. Between him and Curtis Jones, their job is to make sure Thiago gets enough rest, that he doesn't get run into the ground and get more injuries. And if he can do that, there's no one. I don't think there's a better midfielder on the planet at what he does than Thiago. No. There might be one or two others who are as good, but there's no one better, because look how fucking good he is. So that, you know what I mean, just get lads on the pitch, get him on the pitch as much as we can, hopefully choose what games he plays. I think that's still possible. Some players it's not. You can't choose with Naby, apparently. You know, it's so random. But no, I think we'll see. I think brilliant discussion point though. And again, I made that point on the second topic. A few weeks from now, you know, hopefully this is just a bit of a non-issue and Liverpool are up and running, and you know, we'll find other things to get upset about, won't we? Quadbod says our midfield is our engine. just haven't had the replacement parts to keep it running for the first 6 games. Superstars in our team all rely on the engine. I've been impressed by how our young players have stepped up, and I think this will bear fruit in the future. Prime Carvalho and Elliott with Bellingham, juicy. Danny M says our midfield is designed to support the back line so Trent and Robbo can bomb forward. And Titch Green says the midfield have only been poor in one game against Fulham. From their performances have improved, but availability has killed us. I think we should be giving the players more credit for the work they're doing. And that, of course, then his follow-up point was, first of all, everyone was awful against Fulham, not just the midfield. Yeah, absolutely, mate.
When you have like a glass half full approach, you see things totally different to a glass half empty. Unfortunately, we see a lot of the half empty on because it gets reverberated a lot more, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
But pundits don't get given jobs and don't get given contracts for coming in and saying it's all right, everything's good.
No, but
they look for negatives.
There's no exactly. It's mad to me. There's too many pundits I don't think who don't love football. Why is Ali McCoist a breath of fresh air on co-coms? Because he fucking loves it. He loves it. I find it so joyous listening to Ali McCoist do commentary. Why is Peter Drury thought of the best commentator? Because he's so passionate when he talks about it. He upsells the good rather than than drags out the bad. And it's like there's too many pundits there who just, it's who's to blame. Whose fault is it? Why? There's always got to be someone to blame, and it's someone who's the dickhead, and that's the reason why it's not working.
The British media in general build things up to shoot them down.
But it's always been that way, and that's why we exist, because I got so bored of just like dour pundits who clearly hated football and hated Liverpool, talking about Liverpool, and we've gone full circle, because unfortunately what they've done is they've copied Arsenal Fan TV whining outside football grounds instead of copying against sensible, reasonable analysis. Footy's boss. That's why people lose their heads, because they forget that there's another 11 lads who want to win a game of football there. You can't win every week, every single week.
50, 40, 30,000 fans in a stadium roaring their team on as well.
Exactly. We play against other teams. There's 19 other teams trying to win the league, and I know we scoff at that, but it's true. Everyone wants to win the league. Everyone plays to win as many games as possible, and if you win more games than everyone else, you're going to win the league. That's how league footy works, but it's not possible because someone's got to come out on top. When you're on top, great, enjoy it, but because of how football is talked about, we've lost sight of the brilliance of what a great. Again, I've been waxing lyrical about Joe Gomez for 2 weeks now.
Brilliant,
absolutely fucking brilliant. Great to have a player of that quality. Harvey Elliott's been absolutely magnificent coming into the midfield.
He's been our best player, by the way, Elliott, this season, and when he's playing midfield, that's one of the things that makes me laugh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, completely agree. Thank you so much for joining us. If you need more debate shows in your life, then go to redmenplus.com. Check out that full show again for the chat around Nike, where they rank in terms of Liverpool's kit manufacturers of all time, one of the best Liverpool kits. If you just need just a little bit of a pick-me-up, you don't need to get into all that, the horrible, dark, miserable chat, then we've got you covered in that regard. If you want the dark, miserable chat, we've got that as well. Plenty of Liverpool content over on redmenplus.com right now. See it over there. Get closer to Liverpool Football Club and the amazing city of Liverpool with Redmen Plus. More content for your eyes and ears, documentaries, extra bonus Redmen shows, podcast features, interviews. Get close to the culture of Liverpool Football Club on Redmen Plus.